finite game is known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Football, baseball. There's always a beginning, middle, and an end, and if there's a winner, necessarily they have to be losers. Then you have infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players, which means new players can join any time, and you don't necessarily know who all the other players are. The rules are changeable, which means every player can play however they want, and the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. Companies come and go, and yet the game continues with you or without you, and there's no such thing as winning. Nobody wins business. It doesn't exist. But if you listen to the language of too many leaders, it becomes abundantly clear they don't always know the game they're playing in. They talk about being number one, or being the best, or beating their competition. Based on what? And I love it when executives come to me and say, we are number one. And I always say, for now. The idea of building a company that can survive every single employee in this room after you've long gone, and that company remains true to its purpose, is a very, very powerful thing. The Walt Disney Company, the purpose that Disney founded, and they've gone through, trials and tribulations for sure. For the most part, when they are at their natural best, they harken back to their founding purpose. And I love that. You ask me, is it essential? Depends on what kind of company you want to run. If you want a company that can continue to innovate and set the course for what business should look like, define what innovation looks like in your industry, then build that company. But if you want to build a company that just sucks the life out of people who work there, and it does damage to the communities in which we work, all in the name of short-term gains, you can build that company too. And it'll come at a much steeper cost in terms of love, loyalty, et cetera, et cetera. So,
need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because in my first business, I was making $300 a month. I quit on my business partner, and the thing that saved me was studying the stories of super successful entrepreneurs. So I hope that this story today helps give you the motivation you need, because I still need it too myself.
So today, let's learn from one of the best, Simon Sinek, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2 is set goals with purpose.
Purpose is always idealized, right? Like, as I said before, I imagine a world in which, right? I know I'm not going to get there. Like when Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. Like one day little black children will hold hands on the playground with little white children, right? Like all of these things, they're all strivings. And the milestones that we pass make us feel like we're making progress. And that's why metrics are really important and milestones are really important. And the most important thing is context. There's nothing wrong with quarterly numbers or annual numbers. The only question I would ask is, to what end? To what end? Like, I was talking to a young entrepreneur last night, and she's looking for investment. And one of her potential investors said, how long is it going to take you to hit $100 million revenues? And I said, don't take that person's investment. Show me one article, one. I just need one. Show me one article in HBR, one study, I don't care, that demonstrates that hypergrowth or high-speed growth is good for the company on any level. The answer is there are none. The pressure comes from that person trying to achieve their financial goals. So they put pressure on you to make your short-term goals, right? And so there's nothing wrong with goals as long as we understand the context and the purpose of that goal, right? I like to think of money like fuel, right? And a car is the company, and the purpose is the destination, right? And if money is fuel, it makes the car go. You absolutely have to have money to make the company go. There is no dreaming big if you have no fuel. You can have the most beautiful car in the world, and yet if you got no fuel, it's pointless. But we don't own a car to buy fuel, right? We don't have companies simply for the money. Right? It's the destination. You want to be able to go somewhere. And the passengers are the employees, and they're excited, not about the fuel in the car. How much fuel do we have? No one gets excited by that. We get excited where we're going. We're going to Alaska. Are we near? And that's the analogy. And when there's a roadblock, if you're only driven by the metrics, then the way we think about money, the way we think about corporate goals is the same way we think about our goal is to drive 200 miles a day. Our goal is to make X amount of money, right? That's how we think about it. Well, what happens if you drive 150 miles? Is that a problem? What happens if there's a roadblock? Do you know what to do? You start freaking out and panicking because you're going to miss your numbers. Where purpose-driven companies that know their destinations in the idealized state, they take detours. And to the outside world, it looks like you're going sideways or slowly, but you're just going around. And that's how companies actually look. It's circuitous and messy. And purpose helps us keep focused on the very far distant future, so we know we're going in the right vector, even if somebody can't tell we're going in the right direction. And so people have to understand the purpose of the goals you're setting and how they're contributing to something. And start talking, like we and our P&L, I don't have the word profit on my P&L. It doesn't exist. On my P&L, it says freedom. I damn well want more freedom this month than I had last month, right? Freedom to say no to things I don't want to do, freedom to give it away, freedom to take care of my people. I want freedom because profit means nothing. So I'm trying to contextualize all of these words that have no inherent magic to them. So yeah, think of money like fuel, and fuel drives your purpose. Be purpose-driven and talk about the place you're trying to get to and talk about the world that you imagine. And you damn well better make a lot of fuel to get there because it's going to be expensive and it's going to take a long time.
Rule number 3 is never stop evolving. Any participant in any industry can get lazy when there is little change in how that industry operates. And then when there's a sudden change to how the industry operates, everybody gets angry, panics, and points a finger. I'll give you an example. Okay? I'll give you 2 examples. Example number 1. Taxi companies around the world hate Uber. Right? Now, here's the reality. The app that calls a car, not proprietary. You can call a taxi with an app. Right? Paying with your phone, not proprietary. Any taxi can do that as well. The reason Uber is eating taxi companies for lunch is because it's a better product. And the taxi companies around the world could have a shitty product because you're the only game in town and we had no choice. And now you have a competitor, and instead of competing, you're getting angry. I would gladly take more cabs than call services if I got in the cab and he said hi and it was clean and I had a nice chat with him and he wasn't on the phone and he wasn't smoking and all of these things and I had some leg room. I'd gladly. It has nothing to do with the app, the pay mechanism. It has to do with the fact that Juno and Lyft are just better. It's just a better experience, better product. That's why I take them. It costs $1 more. Whatever, I'll pay for it. It's not even a price thing. I have no idea if it's cheaper or more expensive. I actually have never compared. The same goes for Starbucks, right? So there was a lot of people hate Starbucks because they put mom and pops out of business, right? The reality is the complete opposite. That when Starbucks moves into a neighborhood, mom and pops coffee shops actually do better for 2 reasons. 1, Starbucks attracts more customers, so there's just more people. And the second reason is there is a groundswell of giving back to the local, and so more people go to the mom and pop, right? The ones that go out of business, the ones that refuse to compete. I'll give you a real life example. This goes back a few years. A real life example. I'm lactose intolerant, right? So I don't have milk in my coffee. And there was a time where it wasn't a foregone conclusion that every coffee shop had soy milk or almond milk or something. So I would always go into the mom and pop that was across the street from Starbucks, always go into the mom and pop and I'd say, do you guys have any soy milk? And they go, nope. I go like, thank you. And I would walk out. Those went out of business because I went to Starbucks. He's right, I went to Starbucks. Now, had Starbucks moved in and they went across the street and said, let's see what Starbucks has, we should offer soy milk. Maybe it's time for us to replace this ripped couch that we've had for 15 years because it's really nice across there and it's really gross here. It's the ones who got angry and refused to compete that went out of business. I think retail's the same. Everybody's pointing fingers instead of saying, we've had it really good for a bunch of years. And the question is now, what is our competitor revealing about our own weaknesses that we can learn to improve? Because that's what competition does. Competition reveals your weaknesses to you. And when you had no competition, you didn't know where you were weak. This is the problem with being the best at anything. Because you don't know where your faults are, and then somebody undermines you because they can see your faults before you can. Rule number 4 is build your confidence.
No one is born with self-confidence. 0. Right? Every single one of us, our self-confidence was determined by how we were raised, the parents we had, the teachers we had, the bosses we've had, the jobs we've had. My sister worked for a company for 17 years, and her boss destroyed her self-confidence. She came out of that job, and she didn't realize until she got into her new job how afraid she was to make decisions because of her boss. And it took a while for her to get her confidence back. And so if somebody's insecure, we have to over and over and over again prove to them because we don't know where they came from. We don't know what kind of trouble they got in before for being honest, right? Or how they were raised. We don't know. And so we have to total empathy and just prove to them that if they make a mistake, they're going to get helped, not hurt. They're going to get supported, not yelled at. And the first time they won't believe you. They think it's a game. They think it's a con. It's a trick. The second time, maybe. And we just have to keep at it. That every time, I used to have somebody on my team who would regularly lie to me, right? Because she would rather lie to me than tell me that she made a mistake. And if I saw the lie, I would ask so many questions to get her to say to me, I screwed up. I'd be like, well, this doesn't make sense. Because I can't say you're lying to me, right? I'd just say, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. If this adds up to this, then why is it that? And the lie would get bigger, and then she would yell at me about how I don't trust her. And then at the end, I have to be like, listen, it clearly doesn't add up. I'm okay if it doesn't add up, if you made a mistake. Just tell me, and I'm good, and we'll move on. But when you deceive me, I'm going to ask you so many questions to get to the truth that it's going to get worse and worse and worse. I had to have that conversation with her probably 50 times before little cracks started to show, where she showed up to me once where one number wasn't there, and she looked at me and said, I made a mistake. And I went, cool, thanks. Alan Mulally puts it brilliantly. He says, you have a problem. You are not the problem. Right? So if something goes wrong, we have a problem, but you are not the problem. And that's the point is, we've too many times told people that they're the problem. So I think it's just going to take time and patience, and you have to do the hard work of helping that person build up their confidence again.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
Rule number 5 is find worthy rivals.
Human beings, we can't help ourselves but compare ourselves to others. And comparison is the deadliest thing we can do to ourselves, because we will always come up short. I mean, all it does is exaggerate all of our insecurities. It's okay to enjoy other people's success, but you let them live their lives and you live your life. Oh, and by the way, they're curating their social media. That's not really their life. And so you're making decisions based on how you feel, based on their curated things. I know, I've talked to so many millennials. I know somebody who's out of work, really depressed, and yet she goes and does all these things so she has the appearance of this amazing, successful life. And so now she may be making those decisions based on what her friends, who knows what sort of weird, twisted, exaggerated, circle of depression this is forming. So go back to the rules of the infinite game. Your friends are there to admire. Your friends are there to say, God, I'm so happy for them. What are they doing that I can learn from? I'll give you an example. So we can all fall into this trap. So, in my business, authors and speakers and folks like us, we're all comparing ourselves to each other, and sometimes it can get silly and competitive. And there was, sometimes I go on Amazon and I check the rankings of my books to see that I still have a job. And now and then there was this one author who I hated for no reason. He's very smart. His work's incredibly good. He's incredibly well respected. I respect him, but I hate him. And I would check the rankings of his books. And when I was ahead, I'd be like, yes. And when he was ahead, I was like, right? It would drive me crazy. And I had this weird abstract competition. Same thing, right? Social media happened to be Amazon rankings.
Right.
And I would check in all the time. I'd always check in, mine, his, nobody else, just mine and his. Anyway, I was at an event and we were interviewed together on the same stage. And the interviewer decided to let us introduce each other. So I went first. I had to introduce him. And this is what I said. I looked at him and I said, you make me very insecure. I said, because all of your strengths are all of my weaknesses. And every time I see you do well, it just reminds me what I'm bad at. That's how I opened up. he turned to me and he said, "Funny, I feel the same way about you." And now we love each other. Because I realized that he's really good at what I'm bad at. So by me getting to know him and really learning to love him, I'm realizing I'm getting better at those things. And I'm taking more pride in the things that I'm good at rather than thinking I have to be good at everything he's good at. Right? So it's healthy to grow our own strengths and rather than be intimidated by the strengths of others.
Rule number 6 is embrace failure.
Let's be crystal clear what a trusting team is. We've all been on one in the past, and I hope you're on one right now. We've all been on trusting teams where we have psychological safety to say out loud, I made a mistake, or I need help, or I don't know, or I've got some stuff at home and I'm struggling and it's affecting my work product, and I need help, without any fear of humiliation, retribution, or that it'll affect your promotability. That's what being on a trusting team is, and that's what we have to build for the people who work for us. Not being on a trusting team, we've also all been there, unfortunately, where we're afraid to say, I made a mistake. We would never say, I don't know something or don't understand something. We would never ask for help because we're either going to get humiliated publicly or we're going to affect our promotability. And the opportunity to build trusting teams is what leadership is all about. That's where the strength of culture comes from. So yeah, it's essential to building any kind of business, short-term or long-term, but definitely a long-term company for sure. And all the stuff you talk about, challenging and pushing boundaries, means if you're pushing boundaries and you're thinking big, you're going to fall a lot. It happens. There's no such thing as innovation without experimentation, and experimentation inherently requires failure. And I think a lot of companies that are too finite-minded, they fear failure. They fear, well, let me restate. I actually don't like the word failure. You know, you hear it a lot, which is, we have a fail-fast culture, I think the problem with the word failure is it's like the word cancer, which is there's a huge difference between stage 4 liver cancer and melanoma, and a mild melanoma. But they're both called cancer. That's the problem. And there are failures which are minor and overcomable, and there are failures that are catastrophic. But the problem is they're both called failure. I like the word falling. Failure we should work very hard to avoid. But falling, we should encourage because you can get back up. I know of one large gaming company, and I love this, that they don't have parties when they hit their goals. They have parties when they fail. They have parties when a game is a complete blowout, because they're trying to acculturize being comfortable with missing a goal or complete abject failure. And they have a party, and they have their own champagne, which it has a label on it. Their own label, I think it's called, they're called lessons. And on the back of the champagne bottle after the party, they actually write the lessons they learned from the failure. And so it's a company that's very comfortable with failing, which means they try again very easily, and they're super innovative. So creating a culture where falling is part of the game, I think is wonderful. It has to be celebrated. I love it.
Rule number 7 is find your vision.
Passion is not an input. Passion is an output. Passion, we're all passionate. We're just not all passionate for the same things. And we will feel what we call passion when we are involved in something that is deeply personal to us, that is helping us advance some higher purpose or cause. Then when we go to work, what we experience is passion. But if you make us do something that we feel no personal connection to, that is not us helping advance any kind of bigger ideal, then what we feel is stress. Now, passionate people work many hours, they don't come home, they miss their families, they take business trips, they don't sleep, and yet it feels worth it. People who are stressed go on business trips, they miss their families, they work long hours, they don't sleep, but it doesn't feel worth it. Passion is an output, not an input. Like stress is an output, not an input. So you can't do what you're passionate about, you find something you believe in, and what you will experience is passion. So then it begs the question, how do I find what I believe in, right? I think society, especially our society, and especially for a younger generation, puts overwhelming pressure on us to have a vision. What's your vision? Or find your bliss, or all of these, they're all the same thing, right? And the problem is we're not all visionaries. It's unfair. It's an unfair standard. That's like telling everybody to be creative, but we're not all creative. Or everybody be good at math, but we're not all good at math. We're not all visionaries. Only a small percentage of our population are actually visionary. You don't have to have a vision. You have to find a vision, right? If you hear Martin Luther King say, I have a dream that one day little black children will hold hands on the playground with little white children, you go, that's what I want. You choose to follow Dr. King. When you hear the words of visionaries, and if they appeal to you on some visceral level, they give you goosebumps, they make you excited, they make you want to sacrifice, be a part of it, stand in line to hear them, pay money, whatever it is, follow that, make that your vision. Take it and say, that's my vision too. You can adopt someone else's vision and make it your own. That's what we call a following. Is we have taken the visionary's vision and we have chosen to follow that vision ourselves. We are followers. That's a good thing. There's no difference between the visionary and the follower. We both see ourselves in service to something bigger than ourselves. Whether you are the originator of that idea or not is irrelevant. What it does is fuel passion. What it does is fuel conviction. So we don't have to have a vision, but we do have to find one. And so read books, watch TED Talks, read articles, be in life. Watch videos, go out, seek, find, listen to leaders, corporate, political, whoever. And when something resonates with you, even if you don't know why, that then you can adopt. And you can take it upon yourself to use your own talents, your own gifts, to help advance whatever that cause is. Right? So I have a cause. I have a crystal clear vision of the world I want to live in. I imagine a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe at work, and return home fulfilled at the end of the day. The gift that I have committed to help advance that cause is the ability to put some of these ideas into words that other people can relate to. When you do a jigsaw puzzle, the first thing you do is lean the box against the wall. Right? We all have a piece of the puzzle to help build this vision. My piece of the puzzle is I'm the guy that points at the box. But I'm not the guy who builds the business. Because there are other people who are better at that, the entrepreneurs and the business leaders. I want them to embrace the same picture on the box. The people who work for companies who say, I want to work for a company that does that. That's their piece. The one who's a gifted natural leader who cares. We all have at least one friend who, for whatever reason, love us and care us even when we're horrible people. That for some reason they still believe in us and they see the good in us. That's their piece of the puzzle. And so we have to commit our gifts. The reason they call them gifts is because they're forgiving. That's what gifts are. They're for giving away. If you have a gift, it's not something you take, it's something you give. So I think we have to find a vision and commit our gifts to help advance that vision. And the great leaders are the ones that can put that vision into words so clear that we can then recite that vision as if it were our own.
Rule number 8 is stop holding yourself back.
The human brain cannot comprehend the negative. It is incapable. Yes, it's true. I'll give you an example.
I believe you.
Okay? No, I'll give you an example. You don't have to believe me. I'll prove it. Okay? The human brain cannot comprehend the negative. You ready? Don't think of an elephant.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. You can't tell the human brain not to do something, right? And so what happens is we very often reinforce things when we put things in the negative, right? I can't get apart. I can't get apart. I can't get apart, right? Or I can't do this versus I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this, right? And it's such a huge thing to convert things into the affirmative. You're supposed to do it with children as well. We're supposed to say, instead of saying to children, don't eat on the couch, we're supposed to say, eat at the table. Right? We tell people what we want them to do, not what we don't want to do. Pilots know this, right? It is well known in the pilot community that when you tell a pilot, don't hit the obstacle, they'll hit the obstacle. Because what they're doing is focusing on the obstacle. Skiers know this. If you ever seen skiers go through trees, do you know how they do that? It's very easy. It's actually surprisingly easy. If you go through trees on skis and you go, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, guess what you're watching? You're only looking at trees. All you're doing is seeing trees. You don't understand how anyone can ski with all these trees, right? As opposed to follow the snow, follow the path, follow the path. The only thing you see is the path. Skiers know this. If you say don't hit a tree, you'll hit a tree. You won't be able to find a path because all you see is millions of trees. If you say only follow the path, you actually don't see any trees. There's actually very sparse trees. There's plenty of path, there's plenty of snow. It's the same thing for you. If you focus on the obstacles, all you will see is obstacles. If you focus on the path through the trees, all you will see is path through the trees. It's your choice how you choose to perceive your own career. It's literally perspective.
Rule number 9 is treat others with dignity.
Can you, off the top of your head, can you think of, you compared, the finite mindset to some things with law enforcement.
Sure.
As far as infinite, can you think of anything off the top of your head where you could relate that specifically to what we do and what that might look like?
Anybody who's wearing a uniform here knows this because you've had this experience in your career, right? Which is treating someone with dignity. That's right. Treating someone with dignity has nothing to do whether they are guilty or innocent, right? That everybody here knows that when you treat somebody with dignity, the way they respond to you, even if they've committed a crime and they're sitting there in handcuffs, is very, very different than when we don't treat them with dignity. So for example, treating someone with dignity may look like somebody gets pulled over for expired tags or something and they've got a warrant, I don't know, and you have to tow their car, right? So you call a tow truck, and now somebody who's maybe financially struggling, you've just put at least $300 more that they have to deal with. Or treating them with dignity is like, hey, I gotta tow your car. Before I call a tow truck, do you want to call somebody? You want to call a family member or something who can come here and get your car? That'll save you $300, and help you out, And if you can't call somebody, I'm going to have to tow it, right? That's treating someone with dignity. And everybody here knows that when you treat somebody with dignity, sometimes you're taking them to jail and they thank you. And the way in which people respond to the uniform, if treated with dignity, has nothing to do with breaking the law or being put in handcuffs. It's human being to human being. And so I think in a law enforcement, when law enforcement is conducted in a policing organization, you're thinking about the longevity of the value of the uniform. You're thinking about the relationship of those who wear the uniform in public, how much the public is willing to help us if a crime is committed, and we go out to the public and say, can you help us? And their willingness. Those things are determined right now on a day-to-day basis, right? And you asked before about building of trust, right? There's no big thing you can do that builds trust. Trust is built up with lots and lots and lots of tiny little innocuous little things. Think of it like your own relationship. Like, have you ever been in love? The person who fell in love with you, there wasn't like, I bought you flowers on Valentine's Day, now you love me, right? That's not how it works. It's like, I went to the fridge to get myself a drink and I got you one too without you asking. I woke up in the morning and I said good morning to you before I checked my phone. There was a game on and you said, honey, can I talk to you? And I paused the game and said, what's on your mind? Right? I'm being idealistic. I mean, my point is no one of those things made someone fall in love or trust you, but it's the combination and accumulation of all those tiny little individually innocuous things that we say, I believe you and I trust you. Now imagine an entire organization where we're just trying to do our job, we just have to enforce the law, we just have to do these things, these are the rules, this is how we do it. But the manner in which we conduct ourselves, each one innocuous unto itself, over the course of time, builds tremendous trust with an organization and the community, so that when you need to pull from that trust bank, when you need to make a withdrawal, that's it, right? Because something's gone really horribly wrong, and maybe there was somebody who acted illegally within the department, that you get to say to the community, we screwed up and I need your help to be patient. They go, you're good, you're good. But that trust is earned.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is practice productive brainstorming.
We, like many, made most of our money from in-person and live events and workshops, and of course that instantaneously disappeared. And so we, like many, were forced to pivot. And we took advantage of online learning, but we wanted to do it consistent with our own values. We did live classes because we wanted to retain some sort of human connection as opposed to just on-demand classes. We called up people who we knew, whose work we admired, and we said, "You're struggling too. Why don't you come and share your genius on our platform?" And it became a very cooperative thing. But there's a few tactics that I learned to get from A to B that were really helpful that I never would have done if I didn't have that extreme pressure. So one of the things we did is we shared with the team the vision, which we had, and then we said to the whole team, we can't do this alone. This is literally a team effort. And so what I want 15 ideas from each person in the next 48 hours about how we can deliver on that vision. And the team freaked out. 15 ideas in 48 hours? And if they wanted to work in teams, I was fine with that. And the reason for that is the pressure, if I gave them 3 weeks, well, they would have all done the work the 48 hours before anyway. So, so that was academic. But the important thing was the reason for 15 ideas is because if I only asked for 2 or 3 or 3 or 4, those would be the same ideas I came up with. And it's the ideas that 11, 12, and 13 that were the brilliant ones. And when we came together to report out, we did it in sort of a unique way. I sort of gave this little speech where I said, okay, this is not a competition. This is about contribution. If one person has 6 amazing ideas and you have none, instead of being angry, say thank you, because they just saved your job because they had a great idea. Also, what I learned is that there's a difference between somebody who has an idea and somebody who's good at executing an idea. And the reality is the most creative people in the team that could come up with the ideas weren't the best at executing them. And the ones that didn't have that many ideas, they were great at executing ideas. So it became really interesting to see who were my creators and who were my executors from that one meeting. And we played Boggle rules. If you've ever played the game Boggle, if somebody else has your word, you just skip over it and move on. I said, if somebody says your idea, don't bother saying, well, I had that idea too. I'm not keeping score, I don't care. Simply move on and tell me something else on your list. And we only let people report out 2 or 3 ideas at a time. That way we could sort of get a flavor. And what ended up happening was people would build on the ideas that they heard. And the set of ideas that we had at the end became our ideas. Nobody could claim them anymore because we'd all sort of tinkered with them. And then we broke them into 3 buckets: green, yellow, and red. A green idea was an idea we could execute with the money we had, and we could execute it within the week. A yellow idea was an idea that needed a little more resource, probably take a week to a month. And a red idea, no matter how good it was too expensive or take too long, and we just parked it and said, we'll deal with those one day. And we just took all our green ideas and executed them. A just cause is something a lot more idealistic. It's a statement of the world that you wish, the way the world you wished it worked. It's the world that you imagine. Like, we imagine a world, as PwC, we imagine a world in which, and then we devote our practice, we devote our energy, we devote our resources to advance towards that cause, and we're going to bring our clients with us. The work that we do takes us closer to that cause. So I'll give you an example. So my just cause, our organization's just cause, we imagine a world, so you can see there's that forward thinking, which, as an aside, which is why we call it vision, is because you have to be able to see it, right? So we imagine a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work that they do. That is our cause, and it is a cause so just that we would be willing to sacrifice in order to advance closer towards that ideal. We will never get there. It is an ideal. Okay. And you can look at organizations or leaders that have made profound impact in their industries or in the world. You'll see these just causes, whether it's all men are created equal, right? It's a just cause, imperfect in its own way, but you can see a nation striving. I have a dream, literally imagining that one day little black children will hold hands on the playground with little white children, imperfect in its own, in reality, but you can see a nation striving. When Apple and Steve Jobs used to talk about empowering individuals to stand up to Big Brother, you can see the attraction to the personal computer because it literally gives power to an individual to compete against a corporation. Imperfect, but a striving. And all of these things become striving that become incredibly inspiring for a workforce because they feel like they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. But when you think about innovation, If you say, provide greater value for our clients, and it's not wrong, I have to stress, it's not wrong, but when you say innovate around that, the innovation tends to be more features and benefits. It tends to be tweaking and efficiencies. When you say be the best, I don't even know how you innovate around that, right? You can't say somebody, you know, innovate so we're better. But when you say innovate a way to advance this, the ideas can come from anywhere inside the organization, and the ideas tend to be a lot bigger.
Okay.
So it's not that those things are wrong. It's that what I'm offering are a clearer path to embracing an infinite mindset.
Okay.
Right? It's not that the other doesn't work, it doesn't have value. It just has less value in the infinite game. I think very often companies can risk becoming reactive to things that happen in the marketplace, so here's a great example, right? Let's use a real life example. BlackBerry was a really fantastic company who built a really fantastic product with a really clear sense of vision, which is we make strong, secure, extremely reliable products. And if you remember, if you ever had a BlackBerry, you could throw that thing across the room, drop it on the street, and it just didn't break. It just kept working. It was the most reliable product on the marketplace. You could type on the full QWERTY keyboard without even looking down. You could send a whole email, and governments and big businesses loved it because it was really secure and really reliable. Then the iPhone showed up, and the iPhone was the new shiny object. And BlackBerry, instead of sticking to their core and their beliefs, became distracted by the shiny popularity of the iPhone, which is a completely different animal serving a completely different audience. And they started trying to copy iPhone. So they started putting apps on their BlackBerries, which what did it do? Made it slow and sluggish. Then they started coming out with flat screens. You're not going to make a better iPhone than an iPhone. And they basically destroyed their company because they completely went off the reservation and abandoned their fantastic cause. There could be two marketplaces where you have the shiny object of the iPhone that we use in our personal lives, and our companies prefer that we use a BlackBerry because it's reliable, it's safe, and it's really, really strong. And we could have had two dominant players for two dominant reasons, like a PC and a Mac. Two dominant players for two dominant reasons, for two different reasons. But they didn't. They got distracted. And I can imagine that their business people were saying, you know, business is moving at light speed. We have to react. Or we can work to advance our cause in a different way and not become distracted. And that's part of the hard thing, which is, are we stuck in our old ways? Or are we actually sticking to our long-term vision? That's part of the difficulty of business, to know the difference. The term that's been overused in business, this concept of authenticity, right? All that authenticity means is the things you say and the things you do, you actually believe. And there's a lot of room for cynicism in the financial advisor world, because every financial advisor says the right thing. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you find your nest egg to achieve your financial goals, blah, 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 blah. Every financial advisor I've ever met tells me the same thing. But then the way they make me feel, not always consistent. Where they may say the right things, but then they're not actually listening to the things that I want. I can feel that they're just trying to hammer a product. They're not actually trying to do what I talk about, but rather I can feel that they have an agenda, that they're pushing something on me. And so, you know, we're highly attuned social animals. We can tell the difference. And if somebody's going to put their agenda, their commission, their interests first, then stop saying, I'm here to help you and achieve your financial goals because I care about you. Stop saying those words. I don't have a problem with somebody being selfishly minded when they approach their business. Just stop pretending that you're not. Because the ones that truly do care will be way more creative. If they say, I'm truly trying to help you, they'll be offering advice and forwarding articles that have nothing to do with the financial tools that you can buy from me. I might send you an article about, you know, your teenagers and screen time, for example, because that's one of the things you're concerned about, and I'm here to help you live a better life. Like, I may be more curious about all of the aspects about helping you, of which some are the things that I can deliver on with the financial advice and some financial tools. So I think if you got into this business to help people, then help people. I think that's really, really important.
To me, art is like a gift. You know, if you have capacity, if you have talent, if you have grit and hard work and you want to produce, gifts are supposed to be given. So what's the point of giving a gift if no one gets it, right? What's the point of producing a symphony if no one gets to hear it? So I think reception is important to give the art point, meaning as opposed to pointless. You know, otherwise you're just decorating your home. Now, we could have a debate whether I'm receiving it myself, right? So we could definitely debate that. But I think, and maybe this is just the romantic in me, it has to be enjoyed. And maybe one person is fine. Maybe if you hang it in your own home and it's just for you, that's fine too. But I think art has to be enjoyed. Otherwise, what's the point, you know? Otherwise, it's just therapy, you know? I'm just painting for therapy. And we all do things like that, you know? Art has to have another human being involved. To me, art is about a relationship, right? You can't call yourself a romantic or somebody who chooses to love another if nobody ever feels your love. You know, I think art is a type of language, right? I know people who are the world's worst communicators when it comes to their emotions when you have a conversation with them. I've dated some of them. But given the opportunity to write, it's magical. And the feelings pour out on the page in an eloquence like I've never seen. And as everyone here knows, great art in some way, shape, or form is always personal or semi-autobiographical, right? It's too hard to write pure fiction. You know, we put ourselves in it because it gives it a sense of reality, and it's what makes us passionate for the subject that we're tackling. I know dancers who, you know, you meet them and they're like this, but as soon as they start dancing, you realize it's all there. So art is language, and if no one hears you, you know, if a tree falls in the woods, you know, if no one hears what you're saying, is it worth saying anything? They're just thoughts. So what's the point of writing a play that never gets shown? It's just a thought, you know? It's just an intention. So yeah, no, I think it must be shared. It's one of the ways in which people communicate.
I'll give you a personal example. The person who sold me this property, it was the seller's agent.
Oh, okay.
Right? He was charming and nice and wonderful and lovely and helpful and all the things that I would expect. And I warmed up to him, and he was apparently helping me. And then I remember distinctly at the closing, he sat there with no personality. All of his charm had left. All of his friendliness had gone. He barely engaged with me. He just wanted to be there to collect his check so he could get out of there. And I realized it was all fake. It was all for show. It was all to butter me up so that I would simply sign on the dotted line. And as a result, I will never work with him again as a buyer or a seller. I'll never list with him ever. And I probably will never work with that company again because I realized they just saw me as a number. They never saw me as a person in the first place. He was an old white guy. I mean, that should tell you a little bit of something as well. That's sort of maybe how he was raised in the industry. And by the way, the mortgage broker was no different. You know, he was charming and wonderful and lovely and helped me get a great rate, et cetera, et cetera. And then I remember after I closed, he called me and said, "Congratulations." And I said, "Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you." And he called me just to congratulate me on closing on my house. And then the first thing he said to me was, "And if you know anybody who's looking for a mortgage, I'd really appreciate the recommendation." He never called me to congratulate me. He called me because he wanted the referral. Like, give it a breath. You know, like, call me and congratulate me, and a week later ask me for the referral.
And see, let me tell you what sucks about that. Can I say that? What sucks about that totally is that one person colored your entire opinion.
But this is finite versus infinite.
Okay.
He could only see the transaction. He could only see get business, get more business. Get business, get more business. What he didn't understand is he's dealing with a human being, and the more that there's a relationship, I will gladly recommend him. I will gladly introduce you to my guy, right? Now I'm completely agnostic because if you're going to treat me like a transaction, I'm going to treat you like a transaction. If you're going to treat me like a transaction, I'm going to squeeze you to get more money out of you. I want a lower rate. I'm going to squeeze the agents. But if you treat me like a human being, I'll gladly pay a higher rate because I want to work with you. And that's what infinite-minded players understand better, which is you don't have to be the cheapest. You don't have to have the lowest rate or the lowest price if you have a great relationship.
There's another guy who does what I do. He writes books, he gives talks, etc. His work is extremely well respected, and I admire his work as well. I happen to hate him. He's never done anything mean to me, and we've always had a very cordial relationship when we see each other professionally. I have an arbitrary hatred of him. And as a result of my hatred, I'm extremely competitive with him. I would log on to Amazon on a regular basis and check my book rankings, and then immediately check his. And keep in mind, I check no one else's, just the two of us. And if he was ahead, I was angry, and if I was ahead, I was smug. And whenever his name came up in polite conversation, I would seethe underneath. We were invited to speak together at a conference where we would be interviewed together. And I don't mean like literally, we would be on the stage together. And the interviewer thought it would be fun if we introduced each other. And so I went first. And I turned to him and I said, you make me really insecure. And I said, all of your strengths are all of my weaknesses. And whenever your name comes up, I get really uncomfortable. And he looked at me and he said, funny, I think the same thing about you. The reason I was so competitive with him had nothing to do with him, it had everything to do with me. Because his weaknesses revealed to me, because his strengths revealed to me my weaknesses, it's more difficult to take a hard look at myself and say, here's all the work you have to do. It's much easier, and dare I say more fun, to direct all my energies at beating him. That turned out to be an extremely cathartic experience. And I learned the value of a worthy rival. And the funny thing is, after that experience, I've never checked mine or his book ranking since. I applaud his work, celebrate him, want him to do well, because it turns out working together, we actually are stronger. And I think this is the same folly in business, right? Which is we decide who our competitors are, and then we obsess with beating them. Like ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox were obsessed with beating each other, and all they did was look at Nielsen ratings every morning. And then Netflix came up and didn't, who cares? They're all blew them out of the water, because they weren't even looking. They weren't even watching. Because that's the arbitrariness of, I remember back in the early days when I first started my career, I was in the ad business, and I was junior dog's buddy to the junior dog's buddy. And I was on the competitive analysis team. And basically what that meant was we studied the competition, and we put together decks to the executives of, look what the competition is doing. And we sometimes would hire outside consultants to run, research for us. And if it was too expensive to study 7 of them, we'd cut it down to 4. Which is hilarious if you think about it. So you're making decisions based on 4 and ignore, anyway, you get my point. So I think the value of the other players in your industry, of the other players in the game, is not to beat them. Because there's no such thing. As I said before, Best Buy didn't win anything when Circuit City went bankrupt. But it's to recognize and respect them. There are some players who do some or many things better than you. Maybe they have a better leadership, stronger culture, better marketing. Maybe their products are better designed. Who knows what? And instead of trying to beat them, which could mean you choose underhanded things or just drop your price, you actually say, okay, let's make our product even better. They have revealed our weakness. Let's now work on that. Because the only competitor in an infinite game is yourself.
We always talk about being a stable company, and we talk about investing in stable companies, and are you stable? And you think about stability. Stability is an immobile object, and so companies that are built for stability, yes, they're able to weather storms, but they don't come out stronger or better. They just come out. They get through. Building a company for resilience means that you go into darkness, but you're actually able to adapt for new times, new technologies, new cultures, new politics, new tastes, and you come actually out of the hard times stronger than you went in. Victorinox is a great example. Victorinox, many of us know them by their signature product, which is the old Swiss Army knife. And this company basically made a name for themselves on this basically one line of product. And they had other product, but this was the core. And then something happened that they couldn't predict, nor could they prepare for, which is September 11th happened. And overnight, we were banned from taking their product in our bags.
in our hand luggage or in our pockets. So many of us used to carry a Swiss Army knife in our pockets or just throw one in our hand luggage. Like we all had one. Every birthday for every teenager, they got at least one, right? Every corporate gift, you had a couple of Swiss Army knives. And now we were banned from carrying them, which means you're less likely to buy one to give as a gift. And so their business plummeted overnight through no fault of their own, through no market conditions, nothing predictable. But the genius of Victorinox is that they were built for resilience. And what they did was they, in good times, instead of giving away all the money in big bonuses, in good times, they actually saved a ton of money. And their attitude was, good times don't last, but neither do bad times. And if we want to get through bad times, we need cash. And so instead of panicking and taking loans or whatever it is, they had their own stack of cash that they'd been hoarding. So they had a little financial resilience. But then they looked at other products and they asked their people to help build up. And they started investing heavily in watches. Now we have Victorinox watches, which are much more, and it's still Swiss made, everything that they could do, everything that they knew how to do, clothing, everything, they leveraged their brand heavily and they built it back up. Also, they protected all of their people. They actually made deals with companies prior that if bad times ever happened, that other companies would borrow their employees, which I thought was genius. So they didn't lose their jobs, they just did their jobs somewhere else. And they completely reinvented their company. Now, to this day, their Swiss Army knife never really recovered. It came up back a bit, but it's now not the major product. It is a minor product that they sell because they actually came out stronger and reinvented. And to be able to do that, think about that. Coming in as one kind of company and coming out of as another kind of company, very, very rare and very, very special, but very infinite-minded. What if our why scares us? And we fear that people won't see it. Do we abandon it or do we just go for it? Okay, so there's two thoughts there that are worth unpacking. Okay, if other people don't see it, okay, let's deal with that first because I think that's a little simpler. If other people don't see it, then the question is, are we showing it, right? And so many of us, all of us, especially at various times, we're all lying, hiding, and faking at various points, right? Somebody asks a question, that makes us uncomfortable in a public forum. Sometimes we agree to something. We say yes, even though it's not true, because we just don't want to embarrass ourselves. We're very often inauthentic. Plus, we live in an Instagram, Facebook, TikTokable world. We're all presenting ourselves and curating ourselves as how we want to be. So we're really good at showing people the kind of person we want to be. It's kind of ironic as well, if you think about relationships. We present ourselves as our best selves, but it's only really when our vulnerabilities and insecurities are revealed can love exist. That's that magical authenticity. So I would argue that if the world doesn't see who you are there ways that you can share it with the world in a way that is inspiring to them and authentic to you? How you show up, sometimes the clothes you wear, sometimes it's silly stuff. I would often wear brightly colored ties in college. I know, a little nerdy, but one, because it sort of was a reflection of my independence. I didn't dress like everyone else, but it also made people smile. I would catch them seeing my tie and it would make them smile. And I liked that. And so there are lots of little things we can do personally to bring our why to life. Now, what I'm really interested in is what you said, Andrea, when you said, what if our why scares us? Now, if it's actually scary because it's dangerous or difficult, then maybe it's not fully our why. If it scares us, but because we are afraid that others will judge us for what it is, like this is truly who I am, this is why I wake up out of bed every morning, then I think you have to go for it. Now, the question is, do you have to jump in the deep end? I think that's a question of your own risk tolerance. I think there's nothing wrong with wading into the water, starting in the shallow end. Think about it. Look what I do for a living. Inspire people that do the things that inspire them. Like, how corny and cheesy is that, right? Like, I'm fully aware of that. When I first started talking about it, people were like, well, that's cheesy. I'm like, I know. And so but I still would do it. And was it a jumping in the deep end? No. I would dip my toe and I would test things out. And I would try things out and I'd see how it was received. And sometimes it went well and sometimes it didn't go well. I was learning to swim with my Y, as basically was my Y floaties. I was wearing Y floaties. That's what I was doing. So yeah, I think if it feels right, because that's the test of a Y, does it feel right? Does it feel like who I am? Does it give you chills or goosebumps, or does it make you well up when you think about it? Does it excite you? then it's probably accurate. And yeah, then you're going to have to at least get in the shallow end. You dip your foot in and try using it in certain places. And as you get more comfortable, you'll learn to swim.
I sort of reject the concept of blunt honesty. You know, you can be honest without being an ass. Do I look fat in these jeans? I like the other jeans better. That's an honest assessment without making somebody feel bad, for example. And we also have to get good at evaluating someone's personality. Some people are more sensitive than others. And so a good leader is able to adapt their style and how they offer information so that sometimes they have to be a little more polite to some and they can be a little more blunt with another because their personalities can take it. What we want people to do is hear the feedback, hear the input, and it's based on how they receive it, not how we like to give it. We have to be the adaptable ones as leaders. But he's absolutely right that good leadership starts with care. And I hear this all the time, unfortunately, which is, as a leader, I didn't get to choose my team, so why should I care about them, or why should I trust them? I didn't choose them. Well, you didn't get to choose your children. You love them, and this is one of the risks of leadership. Leaders have to take the risk to care. They have to take the risk to trust first. I've never in my life heard a great leader say, "Prove to me why I should trust you," to their team. It's the opposite. A leader takes the risk to trust, and it's the team who says, "Prove to us why we should trust you." That's the correct hierarchy. So yes, you do have to care. You want to see your people as human beings first. They are not the problem. They may have a problem, and inject a little empathy into the organization. This is what reflects care. So for example, I'll give you one example. So here's a pretty normal scenario. Somebody walks into an office and says, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. If you don't pick up your numbers in the fourth quarter, I don't know what's going to happen. Empathy changes that. You walk into their office and you say, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. Are you okay? What's going on? I'm worried about you. That's empathetic. That's the expression of care, that we recognize that someone may have a problem, but they are not the problem.
I was, during COVID, I worked out with a friend of mine who lives somewhere else. And we worked out on FaceTime together. We would just turn on FaceTime and just do the same workout together, basically. And one day we were doing a particularly difficult workout. And I said to her, I have some good news and I have some bad news. She says, well, what's the bad news? I said, the bad news is we're only halfway done. She says, well, what's the good news? I said, the good news is we're already halfway done. And the simple way in which I present the information literally profoundly changes the way in which we do the second half of the workout. We're only halfway done. The rest of the workout's a slog. It's difficult. It's hard. And we don't want to do it. We're already halfway done. I mean, it's all downhill. We've already done this once. We can easily finish this off. And it's amazing how easy it is to change our mindset. And so it's the same thing here. We've done it in our own organization, where we see another organization who, I hate to use the word, I'll use it just for the example, but outpaces us. I mean, we don't care about that. But and instead of getting all angry and hot and bothered and trying to beat them, we say to them, worthy rival, what strength do they have that's revealing a weakness in us? And we're like, oh my goodness, our website sucks, or our e-commerce sucks, or our customer service sucks, or whatever it is. We spend a lot of time looking at people who we admire, who are in our space, who do some or many things better than us. We look at their websites, we look at their product, we look at their ease of use. We're like, wow, that's really good. We don't have to like it. We don't have to agree with it, but we can still compliment it. And I think that's the big thing. People think that, that you have to hate everything that somebody does. Nonsense. You don't have to agree or like, but you do have to respect. And quite frankly, to put on blinders and go through the world with blinders on, that there's no one else out there and they definitely can't do anything better than you, is quite frankly just stupid, because it's just not true. You're not great at everything, and you never will be. It's an infinite game. It's a game of constant improvement, just like every person. There's no such thing as a perfect person. We should be in a growth mindset, constantly trying to improve every day of our lives. It's the same thing. And that's difficult. Even that you can't grow every day. Even that's hard. It's messy and human, and that's the fun. And that's why you go back to trusting teams and why the teamwork matters so much, because sometimes we can beat up ourselves or get stuck in a negative mindset. And all you need is one person to walk over and be like, hey, worthy rival, right? So the nice thing about worthy rivals is it's subjective. You can choose whichever person, whichever company you want. You don't want to have internal competition, but you can have internal rivals, where there are other people that you compare yourselves to and you try and get better. But you don't want to stab each other in the back, get angry when somebody else gets a promotion. Like we've all had that. Deep down inside, we seethed when somebody gets a promotion when we didn't, right? Even if we weren't even up for it. That's a sign where necessary change needs to happen in our mindset. It's easier to do than you think, and when you get in the habit of it, it's absolutely wonderful. I think some people turn off the humanity when they go to work. They may be loving parents and loving friends and loving children to their own parents, and yet for some reason there's a switch that they think that that's irresponsible to do at work. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily wearing your heart on your sleeve every day. There is something called emotional professionalism. If you're having a bad day, you can say, listen, I'm a little off my game today, but you can't sit in a meeting with your arms folded and be grumpy and give one-word answers. That's emotionally unprofessional. You can have hard feelings, but you can't go around screaming and yelling at people. You can have, so I think there is emotional professionalism, but I think for some reason, especially as people make their way up the ranks, they think that expressing any kind of emotion is a sign of weakness. Even that word vulnerability, we talk, it's such a common word now being talked about in the business world that you have to be vulnerable. To this day, it makes some people feel very uncomfortable. I don't want to be vulnerable. Well, all vulnerability means is saying things like, I don't know, or I need help, or I'm overwhelmed, or can you help me do this because I don't know how to do this, or I've been promoted to a position where maybe I need more training. And the reason we're afraid of saying that is for fear that it makes us look weak, which will then damage our careers. The reality is the total opposite. By saying I don't know means someone can help us. But instead we choose to lie, hide, and fake very often, which eventually gets revealed. Enough stress piled on that lying, hiding, and faking collapses either professionally or personally. We either feel the stress or the projects that we're working on start to go haywire. And very often when we get to those points, everybody knows anyway. The amazing thing that I've learned is when you say, can somebody help me? We're surrounded by people who would love to help us. They just didn't think we needed it because we acted as if we didn't. So I think a large part of it is quite frankly fear. Fear that if I express these things, that people will think I'm not qualified for my job, where the opposite is true. And remember, when you are in a position of leadership, you don't actually have to be better at doing the job that the people you lead. You have to be responsible for taking care of them to make sure they're good at their job. But for some reason, we think that I have to be better than you at your own job because I'm the leader. Completely false. I just have to make sure that you're equipped, you have the tools, the training, and the psychological safety to be the best you can be, even if it's better than me. I think people they create a dichotomy, a false dichotomy, that they have to either choose service or individual success.
Right.
That those two are somehow mutually exclusive. And that service means living a life of suffering, which is nonsense. And then you hear these silly sort of projections like, I'm gonna do well so that I can do good. So I'm gonna put myself first, and then eventually I'll do good for others. A friend of mine who's a philanthropist, someone came to him for advice on philanthropy. And this was a former CEO of a very large company. And my friend asked him, so what are you most proud of in your philanthropy? And he said, well, we started this charity in the inner city where we help kids go on to college. And he said, that's amazing. How many kids have you helped? He said, 15. He says, is that the proudest thing you've done, in your life? He says, yeah, I'm really proud. And my friend said, so let me understand this. You're proud of 15 kids you helped go to college. Meanwhile, you destroyed the lives of the 60,000 people who worked for you. That's what happens when you do well so that you can do good. You put yourself at the center of the equation, and then eventually you'll try and even the scale so you can feel good before you die. And the reality is the opposite is true. Do good, and you can also do well.
Right.
But doing good should not be something that we save for our retirement. Doing good is something that we can do every day, and it's remarkably easy. I mean, what your neighbor did for you, just by looking out his window, was good. saying hello, asking somebody how are you and actually caring about the answer, saying please and thank you. You know, I mean, these are very, very little things that cost nothing that make other people feel like you saw them, that they matter, that they exist. And that is all steps we take to doing good. And of course, it can grow from there. It can scale from there.
What does it mean to live an infinite life? Clearly, our lives are finite. We're born, we die, we come, we go. But life is infinite. The game of life will continue with us or without us. Which means every single one of us has a choice. We don't get to choose the nature of the game. Life is infinite. We don't even get to choose if we want to play in the game or not. Once you're born, you're in it. We get one choice. Do you want to play with a finite mindset, or do you want to play with an infinite mindset? To play with a finite mindset means waking up every day and say, I'm going to be the best, I'm going to be better than everybody else, I'm going to accumulate more power, more responsibility, more money, whatever it is, whatever your metric is, I'm going to get more than anybody else. Me. And when you die, you take none of it with you. Or we can choose to live our lives with an infinite mindset, which means I'm going to leave this world, this school, in better shape than I found it. It means I'm going to devote my life to see that those around me rise. And we know that we're living with an infinite mindset because our obsession is seeing that we have an impact on the lives of the people around us. We've all had teachers, and some of you are those teachers, where 20 or 30 years from now, I can go to one of your students and say, you're a remarkable human being, you've accomplished so much in your life. How did you become the person you are today? And they will tell me your name. We all remember the teacher who believed in us. We all remember the teacher who had our backs. We all remember the teacher who saw something in us that nobody else saw. We've forgotten all the others, but we remember those couple. And that's what it means to live with an infinite mindset. It means we divert ourselves to that mindset for everyone in our lives. That other teachers will say that about us. Other principals will say that about us. Other students will say that about us. Our friends will say that about us. I am who I am today because of you, and I will commit to live the same life that you taught me how to live. And you will literally live on beyond your own lifestyle, your own lifetime. That when you're gone, others will carry your work for you. This is what it means to live an infinite life, and it is just a choice.
There's no such thing as a perfect job, and there's no such thing as a perfect person. Of course there are things that we are doing that hold ourselves back, and of course there are things about the environment in which we work, whether it's the people or the job or whatever the circumstances, that may also be holding us back. I mean, but to see ourselves as victims is not the thing. Mm-hmm. But rather to seek opportunity, and it goes back to that growth mindset, which is what I've learned is one of the best ways to grow oneself is to actually help somebody on the team grow. Service. You know, there's an entire section in the bookshop called self-help, and there's no section in the bookshop called help others. And I think what we've done is we've over-indexed on the whole rugged individualism sort of self-helpy thing. How can I be successful? How can I grow my business? How can I lose weight? How can I find love? And yet we forget, how can I help somebody else grow their business? How can I help somebody else find success? How can I help somebody else lose weight and find love, etc.? And the irony is the more that we set out to help somebody else because we have more objectivity with other people, ironically, we actually learn to help ourselves. I tried this out. I did a little experiment. A dear friend of mine was going through a hard time. A solopreneur. Work wasn't going well. Her marriage was shaky, and she was in a bad place. And so she knows what I do for a living, so she called me up and says, would you spend some time with me? I said, of course. So every single week, religiously, we spent about 90 minutes together. And she'd come over and we would talk. And I would offer her some perspective and some ideas, and she'd feel great for like a day or two, and then she'd go back. And then we'd get together the next week, and she'd feel great for a couple of days, and then go back. And this repeating pattern went on for quite a while. And then I remembered my own work, which is the idea of service, and had a little idea, which is to switch it around. And I called her up and said, look, I would like some coaching too. And it was genuine. I said, you know me better than anybody else. I trust you completely. When we get together for one of our sessions, can I use up some of the time? Can I tell you what I'm going through? And what ended up happening is we spent all 90 minutes talking about my stuff. And this went week after week after week, where she was just the advice giver. And strange things started to happen. She started to get more stability in her work, more stability in her marriage. Her confidence went up. And it was because she was helping me that she was gaining all the insights and perspective, because it wasn't personalized. It's like sales training, and anybody who's ever gone through sales training, you know this, which is you always do it with three people. You know, the person who plays the role of the salesperson, the person who plays the role of the person you're selling to, the buyer, and an observer. And it's the observer that does the learning, not the people playing the roles. Well, in this case, she got to see herself not be so close to it. It gave her objectivity. So I'm a great believer in, if you have a problem to solve at work, try and help somebody else solve that same problem.
I think one of the things that the pandemic revealed, quite frankly, was the weakness of so many corporate cultures. I mean, we're seeing the great resignation happening. And if you read articles or listen to some of the talking heads, you know, the prevailing thought is, well, they're getting, you know, checks from the government, so they're not encouraged to come back to work. Or they're pursuing their dreams, you know, which we've seen as well in our own company. Somebody wants to go be a screenwriter, and even though we have a great relationship and they love their job, they want to pursue their dreams. But the other thing that I think is underlying that it's missing, that these commentaries are missing, is that the cultures may have been weaker than we like to think they are. That the sense of belonging that people have when they would come to work is actually a lot more tenuous than we'd like to believe. So the bond that's allowing them to go off and do other things is easily broken. I think strong cultures, when there's a strong corporate culture, we recognize that I can pursue my dreams and work because I love it here and I know my team is supportive of me becoming a screenwriter or something, and I can do both. Or even though I'm making money, potentially even more money, there's so much more I get from my work. You know, the camaraderie, the love, the support. I get all of this training on how to be a better listener and a better communicator, which is helping me in my marriage and helping me with my kids. And I don't want to lose that. Plus, I have close friends at work, and I can speak up and say, "Hey, I'm being offered more money from the government. Is there anything you can help?" You know, the point is it becomes a conversation rather than a resignation. So I think one of the things that we're missing is this might be a wake-up call for a lot of companies, that our cultures are just not as strong as we think they are. You know, it's been spoken about for years that millennials, you know, and now Gen Z are just not loyal to work. They bounce around from job year to year to year. Well, is that them or is that us? Maybe if we had stronger cultures, they wouldn't want to leave. Maybe if we offered them more than simply financial incentives for hitting certain numbers, that they'd want to stay. Maybe if they felt that they were growing like as human beings, there would be things that were more appealing to them than simply a bigger paycheck somewhere else. So I actually think it's a big wake-up call, frankly, that we should go back and look at our cultures and say, are we as good as we think we are?
So my favorite definition of culture is culture equals values plus behavior. And so you have to have a clear set of values first. And innovation, honesty, you know, these aren't values. Those are the things we write on the wall, but those are nouns. And if it's values plus behavior, it's things we want people to do. Everybody thinks they're honest, yet everybody tells lies. So the value isn't be honest. The value, or honesty, the value is tell the truth. The value isn't innovation. You can't walk into someone's office and say, a little more innovation today, please, right? You know, you can't innovate. You can't execute on innovation. It's not an instruction. But you can tell people, look at the problem from a different angle. Like that's something you can do. So and by the way, your values are not aspirational. They're not a bunch of executives sitting at an offsite, cutting pictures out of magazines and saying, this is the company we want to be. Your values are who you are when you are at your natural best. Your culture already exists, but you're not necessarily always operating at your natural best. And that's as true for companies as it is for individuals. And so to uncover your values is not aspirational. It's a process of discovery. And then you can write down this. I've never seen more than 5, weirdly. Don't understand the biology. But when you start getting more than 5, they start to overlap enough that you could probably eliminate one of them, which I think is interesting. But there's at least at most 5 values, 3 to 5, that are who you are when you operate at your natural best. And now the question is can you develop recognition, rewards, incentives to promote those values? Are you talking about those values? Are you hiring to those values? Are you firing people who may be high performers but refuse to live to those values? Because then what you're doing is reinforcing to the rest of the company that the values matter more than anything else, which is really important. Because if we talk about values, but then all we do is promote toxic team members who are high performers, and we've all had this happen, where sometimes even management knows. You're like, that person is a real asshole. They're like, I know, but their numbers are so good, right? And then we let them be. And so that sends a message to the rest of the company that we're talking about these values, but we don't actually believe it. And so we don't necessarily have to fire that person, but we do have to coach that person.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag Believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome.
For 10 more amazing rules from Robin Sharma, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe. I'll see you there.
I really believe the way you start your day sets up the way you live your day. I really believe that the way you win is how you begin. I really believe that if you can get that first hour right, I call it the victory hour in my book, The 5 a.m. Club,